volition, desire, and curiosity. When the topic of volition is discussed, the Libet experiment will always need to be addressed. Libet first conducted this experiment 50 years ago, and other researchers have conducted many more variations of it in the following years. The philosophical implications of the experiment have been hotly debated ever since. It seemed like there was measurable brain activity, the readiness potential, 200 or more millisecond before the subject even knew they wanted to move their finger. At first, the conclusion was that free will is not a conscious choice, but is embedded in the deterministic physics of the neurons. Many other researchers have debunked this result for various technical reasons. I think there may have been a more fundamental flaw in the experiment due to a basic brain operation that was not taken into account at that time. The basic unaccounted for operation was that a brain can execute a program which can perform at subconscious levels. A brain program, as we will call it, is not anything like a computer program in how it is stored or how it is executed. A brain program must be stored in the neural plasticity of the brain, similar to how the information of knowledge is stored. Anytime we are learning some new sequence of movements, we will need to be slow and deliberate because we have to think about each movement. After a while, we will not need to think as much about each step, and after a longer time, we might be able to perform that sequence without much thought at all. Our brains can be configured to execute movement sequences or other activities using a brain program. This is how we can drive for a time period and then think back realizing we were not aware of driving over that time period. This is how musicians play their instruments while playing memorized music. Musicians certainly cannot think about each note when they are playing a fast sequence. Playing music is obviously accomplished, in part, by executing brain programs. Libet did not take into account that the subjects were executing a brain program while at the same time deciding when to move their fingers. This particular brain program is related to what I will call the pounce program that seems to become a brain program early in the life of humans and animals. An animal will creep up to its prey, and when within striking distance, still wait for the right moment to pounce. The animal is executing a brain program that is generating the urge to go pounce now, over and over again. The program gives the animal the urge to pounce, but the animal can resist the urge until the right moment. That moment will be a conscious decision of volition to pounce. The pounce moment will be driven by all kinds of sensory input factors, but especially the visual experience for movement of the prey. Humans have incorporated such pounce programs too. These programs probably developed through early childhood game playing. Now think about your experiences when you have fly swatter in hand and are ready to swat, pounce, a fly. We can call this brain program the swat program. You will feel internal urges to swat, which you hold back until you make a conscious decision to swat. So if a readiness potential was measured during this swatting activity, there would certainly be readiness potential increases before the conscious volition to actually swat. But this is only because the swat program was running in your brain generating these readiness potentials. Now back to the Libet experiment. It is probably easy for the brain to adapt the swat program for other activities that are similar to swatting. Randomly deciding when to move your finger, as in the Libet experiment, probably used the swat program right from the start. In fact, the subjects commented that they felt an urge to move their fingers and were able to hold the urge off until they actually wanted to move their fingers. The readiness potential was being generated by a brain program and not by volition or free will. This is the basic flaw in the experiment. The experiment was measuring the readiness potential generated by a brain program. It had little to do with volition or free will. Libet was aware that the subjects were getting urges to move their fingers before they actually moved them, but he did not recognize that they were in fact executing brain programs. I think that brain programs will always interfere with any kind of experiment like this, because we probably use brain programs for most of the things we do. It was actually never reasonable to expect that millisecond-timed random finger movements have anything to do with volition or free will. These kinds of experiments are obviously more in the category of neuromechanistic timing studies. Volition is always linked to free will in philosophical discussions. I will attempt to uncouple volition from free will and develop a way of thinking about the concept of volition that does not have the philosophical baggage of free will, although I will make a quick comment at the end about free will. With the perspective of the inter-mind model, IMM, we can ask the question, is volition a process in the conscious mind, CM? Or is it simply neural activity of the right kind in the physical mind, PM? If an animal is going to seek out the good and avoid the bad, as described in a previous section, then the animal is going to have to generate movement commands to its muscles to move toward the good and away from the bad. But the good and the bad are conscious experiences in the conscious mind. So the desire and the volition to seek and avoid must originate in the conscious mind. The physical mind does not experience the good or the bad, so it is not coherent to think that the desire or the volition to seek and avoid are rooted in the physical mind. The desire and the volition to seek and avoid must logically originate in the conscious mind. The conscious mind will experience desire to move toward the good or away from the bad. It is more proper to say that these are conscious desires and conscious volitions. The intermind, I am, will detect these conscious desires and, through conscious volition, will generate the appropriate movements or execute the appropriate brain program to satisfy the conscious desires. We can also explore a higher-level conscious desire that only a human mind could have. Let's consider curiosity and the desire for knowledge. This desire is clearly a conscious experience in the conscious mind. This conscious desire will be satisfied over the time period of a human lifetime. It is a slow-acting conscious desire that gets fulfilled by incremental acts of conscious volition to get the new knowledge. It is easy to understand that conscious volition will always be the mechanism for satisfying conscious desires, even higher-level conscious desires. We might expect that there will be some neural activity associated with these conscious desires. That neural activity will be the neural correlates of the conscious desires. But neural activity is not a consciously experienced desire. The experience of a desire must be in the conscious mind. So if there is neural activity in the brain, but there is no experienced conscious desire, then there is no desire at all. The human brain cannot desire anything, because the human brain is a physical thing, and desire happens as a conscious experience in a conscious mind. Since the human brain cannot have desires, we can conclude that it has no volition capability to satisfy desires. Clearly, volition is a purely conscious phenomenon that has to flow from the conscious mind back through the intermind and to the physical mind. We can abstract this further and say that since the human brain cannot exercise volition, that it also has no free will. If there is any free will, it is in the conscious mind and not in the physical mind. Since we know that computers have no connections to an intermind or to a conscious mind, it is obvious that there are no volition inputs to computers as they are constructed today. Without consciousness, there is no volition. For brains, this statement must still apply even if you believe that consciousness is in the neurons or emerges from the neurons, because there has to be some implementation of the functionality of consciousness, somewhere, somehow.